Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah, and I am joined today by my friend, Dr. Doug. Doug, how are you?
I'm doing great, Sarah. Thank you for letting me
Good.
on your show.
I'm so pleased to have you. I wanted to share a bit of your background with everybody. I told Natalie, Natalie is Dr. Doug's wife, that he has one of the best bios that I've ever seen. And as a PR and marketing professional, I'm very proud and impressed. So I'll go ahead and read that. So Dr. Doug.
Natalie's doing the sign over here.
Yes.
That's not my prose. That's hers.
I know. I got to brag on Natalie. Okay. You are a neurologist, and you are also a former Navy pilot and the creator behind Dr. Doug's Miracle Balms.
Yep.
That's a line of all natural, toxin-free skincare products. And you also have a background in genetics and a passion for endurance sports. You're a complex guy. Dr. Doug is really no stranger to solving complex problems, whether that's in medicine or on the trails. And so his unique journey from the cockpit to the clinic and now entrepreneurship is really fueled by his desire to simplify solutions for all kinds of life's challenges, be it brain health or blister prevention. And he's a man of many talents. So Dr. Doug blends science, grit, humor, and makes a big impact one person at a time. So I'm so thrilled to talk to you. Now, Natalie told me that you are a voracious reader. And so I wanted to chat with you about that and just get some recommendations from you for books that have made an impact for you and that are books that we should pick up as well.
So it's funny. It's before Goodreads and things like that, where they say, because you liked, right? It was basically like what we're talking about. Oh, what have you read lately? Oh, well, I'll check it out. And so I had seen, for instance, like Anne Rice movies, but I had never read her books until my sister said, check it out. And so, and I'm kind of a completionist. It's like an OC thing. But I started in book one. And so the most recent book I did was like that. And then the other two reasons I think people look for books is they either want a validation of something they believe, or they want to fill in the chuck hole on the road. Like they have a defect and they want to fix that missing spot. So
I love that idea.
Yeah. And I kind of do, I would say I do all three. I just go where the book spirits lead me. And
so not just nonfiction then, but like you also really enjoy fiction.
Yeah, historical fiction. I go through an entire series of a couple historical fiction books, and then, but I think the things we remember are the things that have a good story, and right. And so, I mean, I can remember when I was in medical school, they said, "Well, you will remember this patient when you retire," and it's because they had a good story.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely true. And so it's, I've seen people in that category before, but the story wasn't as compelling. And it really humanizes them, and it really, makes them, it connects them to you in multiple ways. And so I think that's what drives my book reading. I've picked up some books as recommendations that, weren't stellar, but I'm glad I read them. And then there's others that you get so self-invested in the characters and you cheer for them and that sort of thing.
So if you like historical fiction, I wonder if you've read Shogun and the new.
Yeah.
So did you read that? You got through that like chunker of a book?
Oh my gosh, but I never knew. So it satisfied two things. It gave me a treatment of a part of history that I did not know much about.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it taught me a lot about Japan, which is a fascinating country. And
100%.
Like it's such a homogeneous country and yet so different. Like the people there can be so different. Now, I learned a lot, and that's now in the world of looking things up on your own. You can always go, oh, I wonder what they're really talking about here. But I still use things from books like Shogun and The Office, and even one of Natalie's boys, he broke something, and there's the Japanese practice of filling broken things with gold. And it makes it more beautiful. You take something that was beautiful, was broken, you make it more beautiful than it was. And you can thank Shogun, James Clavell, for that.
He's amazing. I'm also kind of freaking out because I love Anne Rice and I love Shogun. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
excellent. Okay. So yeah, Shogun. Okay, I had to, and all transparency, I haven't finished it yet. I started and then I got intimidated. So eventually I'll get back to that.
Yeah. Read them all.
But
Good. All his books are good.
I really would like to. And then with Anne Rice, did you read Anne Rice recently? Or that's just a
Uh,
series that,
it's
or
been
an
a
author
couple
you
years.
like?
That was just the one that my
Okay.
sister-in-law, that was the reference point of people refer me to books. And so, I had no idea Anne Rice. I thought it was just Interview with the Vampire because that was my exposure
Yeah,
to Anne Rice. But my sister-in-law is like, oh no, she's got
there's
range,
more.
depth. She talks about she does a autobiography that's really superb. And then you
I
can
didn't
do,
know that.
yeah, and she talks about her name growing up was like Harry or Howard or Henry or George. Her name wasn't Anne. And you learn all these fine, it's part of the story, right? So even though it's an autobiography.
I would like to read that because I don't want to say that she's passed, but she was a bit of a weirdo, like for sure. And she has this incredible house like in New Orleans that I think you can tour.
I didn't
And
know that, yeah.
that's on my bucket
I mean,
list
her
of like,
autobiography.
yeah,
She would buy
interesting.
Catholic churches. She was raised Catholic and then kind of fell away and then came back to Catholicism. She talks about that too. Like her misunderstanding of what the Catholic Church was because she has a son that's gay and
Hmm.
she didn't realize how welcoming the Catholic Church was to her gay. We have some misperceptions and she
For
dispelled
sure.
that for me. I didn't know those things.
That I didn't know either. And so that's something that I'll definitely check out.
Why we
Um,
meet, right? That's why we try to get them out.
100%. I would also, do you ever listen to audiobooks or is it just books in hand?
Oh no, I do. I like to turn the pages myself. I kind of like the pulpy smell and that sort of thing.
For sure.
But audiobooks, absolutely. The thing about the audiobooks is if I zone out, I have to like go back and so
I fell asleep listening to an audiobook a couple weeks ago and it was like my husband like woke me up and he's like, "You're like 5 hours into this book and you've been sleeping for 5 hours." I'm like, I can't read it now. I don't know where I left off." Anyway, that's the worst. So other types of books you like? You like historical fiction for sure. Even with nonfiction, what other genres or authors do you like?
there's a guy named so I have a great grandfather and great grandmother who are from Montana. So my mother's father was born in
Ooh,
Montana, yeah. And so there's a guy who writes books about Montana and Wyoming in that area. And it's written by a guy named C.J. Box. And they've since then made a TV series out of some of his books. And so they're really not historical fiction, but they're fiction. And once again, you cheer for the characters. You get behind them, and he's really good at character development.
how do you spell his last name?
Box CJ Box.
Box. That's what I thought you said.
CJ Box. It's
Okay,
C,
so
but it's yeah. He writes one about he's a fish and wildlife warden, and that's how he always
cool.
takes his thing, fish and wildlife warden. And then he talks about that guy's day, how his day starts, and it's good.
Incredible. Is it like a mystery series?
It's very much a mystery series. He's
It
kind of
sounds
the
really.
Charlie Jones like character if you're that old.
No, I think my husband would love that because we love watching like Yellowstone and anything right now that's taking place in like Montana, Wyoming. I think he'd enjoy that. So,
So he will.
oh,
And the upside to the audiobooks is even if you've read it yourself, when they read it, they'll do the voice different, and you'll think, "Oh, I didn't get that. I didn't get that emotion out of it." So it's more of a performance than just you not passively, but instead of you just absorbing the words on the page. So
exactly. It's more immersive too, I feel like.
it certainly can be. I mean, I got Natalie started on it, so on the audiobook.
Do you listen to books when because you do like not just, you have to educate me a bit. You do marathons, also triathlons too, but do
Uh-huh.
you listen to books when you're like training for those or is
I
it more
do.
music? Like,
Sure do.
okay.
Yeah, when I believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And
Hmm.
so, I would get done with a long day. I wouldn't even turn on the radio. And so I would go days or weeks without turning on the radio. But with an audiobook, no one asks you questions. It's really non-invasive. You can just absorb. And so that's why I love the audiobook so much.
I want to switch gears and talk a little bit more about the Dr. Doug's Miracle Balms.
Sure.
And this all, of course, you'll have to tell us the story, but it all started from blisters from running, right?
Yeah, blisters and poison ivy, and so I was doing, and we just call them endurance races, and you would show up on a Friday night, and you wouldn't know what the components of the race were. You wouldn't know how far it was. You just knew it was going to be a couple days and nights long, and so it's training for those is you can do an hour a day, and you hope that's enough, but really 2 hours would be better. Well, who's got that kind of time, right? So having an audio book gives you a 2-for-1 opportunity. But one of the books that I just recently read is about an endurance athlete, and it's more about the dog, but it's Arthur. Have you heard about Arthur?
No.
So you can watch the movie and you can read the book, but you will need Kleenex. Your husband will, I don't know if he's a tough guy or not, he will cry because we're dog people.
Yeah, for us too. Oh, I'll have to check that out. Arthur. Okay. Is it fairly new?
I don't know when he wrote it. It's probably a 10-year-old book, but the movie, it's got Mark Wahlberg in it. And
yeah, and the dog kind of is like a stray or something, and like
he's a stray.
Okay.
The movie is a little bit different than the book. I think the movie might have happened, happened in a different South American country than the book was. But yeah, but it's Arthur by Mikael Mikaelind Hold, I think. Lynn Nord.
Awesome. Okay. Yes, for sure.
And he's written other books. I haven't gotten to him yet because I just finished this one. But it's so good.
It sounds like it's going to be a heartbreaker, I think.
About endurance athletes. He's an endurance athlete.
I find that I am not a mountain climber. I will never be a mountain climber, but I love reading books about Mount Everest or, and those kinds of like endurance type of strong athlete journeys. I love that. There's something to that. Living vicariously.
Absolutely. But again, that reinforces the books.
Exactly. You're right. Absolutely. It fills in that void that we're not doing for ourselves. So, with your Dr. Doug's Balm company, you created this product because this was something that was needed from like blisters and doing the endurance runs.
Yeah. And it was things in my kitchen, and I thought I could make it better. I didn't like having 6. All the products out there are great, but I had 5. First, you start with 1, then you have 2, then you have 4. And people would say, try this. And I just wanted one thing. So I was tinkering in my kitchen. I was single at the time. And my cousin and I lived together. Our moms are sisters. So I came up with it, and I thought it was fine. But then other people said, well, could you add a little lavender? And so I was giving it away.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. And then like now together, you and Natalie have created this whole company. I just as a side note, I gotta like what's the word? Shout it out. I love these products because they are the only thing that works for me for blisters. Or I know that like in marketing, we're not supposed to claim that it cures eczema, but in terms of my daughter's eczema, it really makes a huge difference from like the bleeding and the cracks that she'll get on her hands. So we can't do without it. And then I was ill recently, and I just was slathering on like the Miracle Balm with zinc, like on my nose from like the coughing and the nose blowing, like getting so raw, and it made a huge difference. So
well, all those things they were very purpose driven, if not need driven, like the zinc. Even before COVID, flu season would hit, and one of the infectious disease doctors said he always swabbed his sinuses with a zinc product, with bacitracin zinc.
Yeah.
In the winter, the air's dry, you get cracks, and that's how it gets in. It gets in through the cracks in your sinuses. So he said, just lightly blow your nose and put bacitracin zinc. But I actually put zinc balm on a Q-tip, and I swab my sinuses in the winter so that I don't get cooties.
Someone else has recommended that to me, and I haven't dared to do it yet, but now I'm getting more convinced. And they do sell like those zinc swab thingies now, but still, yeah, for sure.
You just put on a Q-tip and use our stuff.
All right. So I want to get back to books just for a second. Nonfiction. Do you read nonfiction in terms of like your for doctoring? Is any recommendations there that you have, like a favorite that you would love for people to read?
It's been a while since I've read this book, but I refer to it so often with different patients. But it's somewhat of a patient-focused book, but doctors need to read it. It's about nutrition and diet. So Dr. Doug's is an all-natural, right, food-grade product. But this guy was talking, the summary is, you're over-medicated. Here are food changes, dietary changes you can make. And it's a book called How Not to Die.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
I'm taking notes. So
all right, we're going to take a 5-second pause for everyone listening to the podcast to grab a pencil and a piece of How Not to Die. And it's by a guy named Michael Greger, Greger, and he's a Harvard MD.
Okay.
And he's a legit guy. I think he reads the book himself. He's not everyone's cup of tea, but he is exactly right about everything he writes. I went to the National Institute of Health and looked up a lot of his assertions. He is exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's going to be life-changing for some of my patients. They say, that's it. And I'm like, that's all you have to do. And I always tell people, buy the book, get a pencil, some sticky notes, and a highlighter, because you'll want all three.
Take notes.
Yeah, take notes. And then, the patients who self-invest and they really dial it in, they come back and they lecture me on my diet, because even though I try to eat healthy, I sometimes have my moments where I'm like a raccoon in a dumpster, and I'm just, whatever. Let's eat.
I think we all do that. I was going to ask, can you give us an example? Like, is there one particular food or?
Yeah. So I'm very anti-statin drug, cholesterol lowering agent. That's probably the biggest one. And Michael Greger, we knew about this, but this conversation is longer than my dietary training in medical school or in residency, right? I mean, they just don't teach it. They don't have the time.
Yeah.
So if you take a handful of Brazil nuts every day, it will lower your cholesterol. Yeah, better than a statin drug. And you can look it up in the National Institute of Health. This is real. This is 15, maybe 20-year-old data. I think the study actually references 50 grams. So I have a little scale and I measured out what was 50 grams. Brazil nuts are different shapes and sizes, but randomly selected 14 Brazil nuts, or about a handful. But you can also do tree nuts of other types, such as cashews or almonds. And, because if you have a stroke, the hospital, the FDA, they all say they must go home on a statin drug.
Yeah.
Right. And so statin drugs can make people foggy. It can make them tired. Can cause nerve, all these different things, because it's working on your metabolism, right? It keeps you from making cholesterol, but it also keeps you from breaking cholesterol down. And I think he does a little bit of a dive on it, but not that deep. But it's one of those books when patients say, so 50 grams and you'll stop my statin. And I have to tell them, well, no. Okay. So here's what the FDA says. Here's what the hospital said. What I'm telling you is, I know why you had a stroke. It's not your cholesterol. We'll cut your dose in half. Here's a note for your family doctor.
Yeah.
To explain to them what I'm doing. And they love it, because, those meds add up after a while.
That too. And then, even I'm taking like 3 different things every day now at mid 40s here. And I'm like, when does this stop? Like, why? Yeah. Anyway, I don't want it to be more.
It's impressive.
For sure.
Yeah. It should be required reading for every 4th-year medical student. That's when you're looking for a job anyway. So you have free time.
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and mention my dad. I think I told Natalie about my dad. He was recently diagnosed, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but Guillain-Barré syndrome.
That's how I pronounce it. Guillain or Guillain-Barré, depending on what part you're from. Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding, like his neurologist had just gone to a conference, like a day-long conference all about it. And so it seems like it's coming up more and more in the news, or at least it seems to be more prevalent. And the more that I've mentioned it to friends, I've had them say, oh yeah, my neighbor had that. My so-and-so has that. So would love to have you explain what it is.
Sure. So neurologists are brain, spine, nerve, muscle, right? That's what we treat. So Guillain-Barré is purely nerve. And so you got to picture all the nerves start in your spine. They pass through a little centimeter to portion of your spinal fluid. And then they're already a peripheral nerve, but once they're outside that CSF area, they're just wiring. So what happens in Guillain-Barré or Guillain-Barré, you have a wire and you have a wrapping around the wire. So the classic purest form of Guillain-Barré is an inflammation of the wrapping of the nerve.
Yeah.
Of the wrapping on the insulation on the wire. And so with that, the other name for it is AIDP. A is acute, I is inflammatory, AIDP demyelinating, and polyneuritis or polyneuropathy. So and they diagnose it with spinal tap and an EMG. You usually don't wait to do the spinal tap and EMG if you know what it is for the classic kind. But people get other flavors. They can get a problem with the wiring. They don't necessarily get better. It's a little bit harder solution. And then people don't always have the classic symptoms of Guillain-Barré. So it's an AIDP. There's one called Miller-Fisher, we call it upside down Guillain-Barré. It affects the above the collarbone first, and they lose their ability to swallow. Yeah. And then, and then they can have a patchy one. But, classically, Guillain-Barré is an ascending, so toes, ankles, shins, knees, flaccid paralysis. And so they'll lose their reflexes at the ankle, then they'll lose it at the knee. And then I've had people go on the respirator. I don't anymore because I'm quicker to pull the trigger on the treatment, but it can go bad. If there's a great book, since this is a book show.
Yeah.
The guy who wrote the book Catch-22, Joseph Heller, he wrote a book, I think it's called Getting Better. It's been 10 or 15 years since I read it. Okay. And there's a picture of him with a tube in his stomach because he couldn't swallow. But Joseph Heller had Guillain-Barré and he wrote about it. And I'd have to look up the title, but if you look up Joseph Heller Catch-22, he talks about it. And it's grim for people who have a loved one with Guillain-Barré or have had Guillain-Barré. But bear in mind, I think this was 40 years ago before we, knew what we were doing. We just people got sick and we put them on the vent and we hope they got better. Yeah. And, he had a much more dire case of it than what we will see now.
I have heard that your nervous system or that casing that is covering the nerves, it takes it takes forever to heal. And I wondered
about a millimeter.
Why?
Well, so it's the nerve. If you scratch the tip of your toe, that nerve starts in or ends up in your toe, but it sources in your spine. So there's no junction there. So you have to get transport out to feed that nerve, and you have to get transport back to get rid of evil fluids and metabolites. So that's why most people, when they have a metabolic or a toxic nerve injury, it starts far and moves near. There's one classic one that goes near to far, but that's more genetic. But yeah, I say an inch a month, which is about a thumb. Yeah. But that's if you cut the nerve, or if you really have a sustained permanent injury of the nerve, it will get better quicker than that with certain treatment modalities. And if you catch it quickly, the quicker you catch it, the easier, the more survival. And of course, young people do better than people my age because they're full of growth hormone and raw materials and vigor.
My dad I want to say maybe I shouldn't say how old my dad is, but my dad is in his 70s. Yeah. But also what's helped is, we didn't catch this until it was very far gone, and he's not able to walk right now. But he did do several treatments of immunoglobulin, which made it a significant impact right away. Yeah. And so
huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
People up, which is comforting for me.
Exactly. And I didn't realize, it's interesting to know that there's like the upside down version of where it affects you collarbone and above, which is, I guess things could be worse. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad he doesn't have that version of it. So,
Yeah, I think it's kind of a rule of thumb for medicine, period, is
mhm,
if I can tell you what it is, it's either common
yeah,
or treatable, right? But if
yeah,
I can't tell you what it is, it's not that common, not that treatable. So it is in his case, catching it early. He has the classic version. It will continue to get better.
got it. All right, well, let's switch gears for a happier topic. And so before I let you go, I wanted to just ask you about books from your childhood that were your favorite.
Oh gosh, my mom. So my dad was a teacher. My mom was a nurse. So we read the Jupiter Jones Three Investigator series.
Yeah.
Hardy Boys. Mom had Hardy Boys. We had all of those. Gosh, I'm seeing a pattern here of all these series books. All Creatures Great and Small.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, it was just we were all readers, and it was. Mom said we were easy travelers because we always had a book and we didn't get car sick.
Now you said your mom was a teacher. What did she
Mom's
teach, or what
Mom's a nurse. Dad was a teacher. Dad
nurse?
taught math and
Oh,
science, and then became an administrator.
very nice. I love that. Yeah, go ahead.
Dad turned us on to reading too. He still has a genuine love of reading, and Mom does more audiobooks. But
Yeah, I love that. Well, Dr. Doug, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You're a busy dude, so I want to let you go. But this was really, really fun to be able to talk to you. And I encourage everyone to please go check out Dr. Doug's Balms. I'll have a link to all of that in the show notes. But really, really good products. And of course, I am just so tickled to know that I share several reading interests with a neurologist. So,
I tell you, you're judged by the company you keep. We're in good company.
exactly. All right, my friend.
Their book recommendations. I'm going to get out my pencil and paper and get some books.
I know for series, I'll be texting Natalie like, here's my favorite series for Doug. So
I bet
all right.
How Not to Die is going to be a big hit, though. You'll see. It's crazy.
I'm gonna go check that out too. I think that's gonna be a good like stocking stuffer for a couple people on my list. So
yeah. I think that's how
awesome.
I got it. That's how I got it. Was a stocking stuffer.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. God bless. Have a great day.